Welcome! Today we're going to look at 3 examples of the Rolex Explorer 1016. First we'll look at a matte dial, a Tiffany dial, the SpaceDweller, and then we'll cover some accessories. First up is a Rolex Explorer from 1972. This one has a matte dial, and if you look at the coronet above Rolex, you'll see that it has a shape that sort of looks like a frog's foot, and that gives this one its nickname. One of the features I like best is the plexiglass here. It has a nice domed shape, and they call this a tropic plexi. You can also see the crown, which has the single line for the single lock feature. It also has drilled lugs, allowing for easier strap changes. This is a nice folded bracelet, original to the watch. Has a nice tinny sound to it. The branded clasp. You can see the end links on this are 258 and the bracelet is 7836. It also has a date stamp of 4th quarter of 1971. Next up, we have a Rolex Explorer with a Tiffany stamp on it. This is from 1976. You can notice right away that the coronet is a little bit taller than the previous example. It also has a matte dial, this time with a Tiffany Co stamp that was applied by Tiffany, not by Rolex. The familiar side profile with the domed plexi. And this example is on a riveted CNI bracelet. The CNI bracelets were made for the US market. The CNI models have relatively even links, whereas the European models have a wider center link. Another difference is that the rivets on the CNI models have a dimple in them, whereas the rivets on the European model bracelets are solid. The rivet bracelets are my favorite. They add an extra little touch of character. You can see the CNI stamp here with the date stamp of 1st quarter of 1973. One thing to note about this particular bracelet is that the end links are unmarked and they're integrated to the bracelet. On the previous example, the end links were separate from the bracelet and are just held in by the spring bar. And last but not least, we have a Rolex SpaceDweller from 1968. Now, not much is known about the origins of the SpaceDweller, but we do know that it is a Rolex Explorer 1016 in every way except for the SpaceDweller on the dial. There have been stories that this watch was introduced in Japan in a limited release to commemorate the visit of American astronauts there in the 1960s. However, I have not seen any hard evidence of this. I've noticed amongst other SpaceDwellers that sometimes there's variations in the relative serial number range as well as the length of the hand in comparison to the minute track. Altogether, this suggests that perhaps the dials were loose dials that were later married to Rolex Explorer 1016 cases. And indeed, that's exactly what we have here. In 2008, Sotheby's auctioned off 4 loose SpaceDweller dials, one of which is the dial that's on this very example here. When I acquired this watch, this dial was in this case, and I only recently discovered that the dial had been one of the Sotheby's lots. Another piece of evidence we have around the timing of the SpaceDweller dial is this trademark registered to Rolex in 1968. This trademark indicates that the first use in commerce was in July of 1967, and that Rolex had applied for the trademark in Switzerland in 1966. Among the few SpaceDweller examples I'm aware of, their case production dates range between 1963 and 1968. Because a number of examples have case production dates before Rolex started using the SpaceDweller mark, this reinforces the idea that the dials were produced and then later married with Explorer 1016 cases. Apart from the SpaceDweller text, which is in a nice silver print, the dial is a typical gilt dial from the late 1960s Explorer run. You can see that the dial has continued to oxidize since the Sotheby's auction, developing a nice caramel color around the perimeter of the dial. Now let's take a quick look under the loupe. You can see the oxidation I was talking about and the distinctive lume on the 6, which matches the Sotheby's dial. This bracelet wasn't born with this watch, it was a later replacement, but it is a CNI bracelet such as the earlier example. Now that we've covered all the watches, let's take a look at some accessories. This is the box and papers for the 1972 Explorer that we covered at the beginning. The Rolex paperwork at the time suggested that you remove the contents and use the box to store cigarettes. Here's the hang tag, and there's this handy booklet for the paperwork. It included an instruction manual about your new Explorer. This one's interesting in that it's stamped by the Rolex personnel department, basically the HR department of Rolex, because this watch was sold to one of their salespeople. Now we'll take a look at some of the great advertising of the Rolex Explorer over the years. Many of these advertisements talk about the tool watch aspect of the Explorer, that it's rugged and precise for scientific or adventuring expeditions. This is one of my favorite ads of the Rolex Explorer being used on the Matterhorn. This is another great ad from 1954, connecting the Explorer to the climbers of Everest. Of course, the Explorer wasn't the first watch on Everest, but an early pre-Explorer model was. And here's an interesting Tiffany Co advertisement that actually shows the Explorer 1016 with the Tiffany stamp on it. This ad was sourced by my friend Nick at Ad Patina, and we matted it in this nice Tiffany blue color. So there you have it, 3 great Rolex Explorer 1016s. Please like and subscribe, and have a great day.